Monday, April 10th, and this is Geeknights. Tonight we talk about home networking and a bunch of other meta bits.
Let's do this.
So as I've mentioned several times in the past, I like to edit Wikipedia articles. Now, I don't usually write like entirely new content. I usually go through and fix, terrible grammar or people who just don't know what they're talking about, or
people who say that indigo children are real.
Yeah, that's like my pet article. I keep going back there and fixing it. But anyway, I never had an account on Wikipedia. I just decided that I would always just do it anonymously, and I didn't really care. Like, I never participate in the talk pages or anything. I just edit. And the other day, I was at work, and I was doing something that didn't require my input, and I was waiting for it to finish. So I'm sitting there, and I decided to go check on some Wikipedia. And I found an article that had a fairly glaring typo in it. So I go, and I try to change it, and I submit. And then a message pops up at the top when I reload the page saying something about an edit I made recently is bad. And I look, and in my history page, which is basically if you don't log into Wikipedia, logging in is actually more anonymous than not logging in. Because if you log in, you have a username. If you don't log in, it tracks you by IP address. And the IP address that I connect to Wikipedia from work with is shared by a lot of people through a net. And I discovered that countless Indians in IBM have been writing countless terrible articles about countless Indian things all over Wikipedia. They've been just writing stuff, like writing an article that has nothing in it, making new articles that are empty or just full of gibberish, all over the place, to the point that the IP address I was using is being watched.
Really? People who work at IBM, who are from the country of India, are writing bad articles on Wikipedia in great number, or is this one guy?
I think it's a bunch of guys, because the topics were wide and varied over a long period of time.
Maybe it's one guy who just is writing about everything Indian over time.
Possibly, but I wish I could show you guys the page that shows my history. I really don't want to give away all the IP address I connect from, but suffice to say, there are numerous, and it's not like people are writing bad things, like making up stuff about Pakistan or just lying about India. It's broken articles with bad HTML or bad wiki code.
Wow. So why does he keep doing it?
I don't know. All I know is I stopped editing Wikipedia from work because I don't want my awesome edits to be intermingled with this guy's IP address.
That's the trouble of Nat, which we will discuss in this episode.
Yep, I'm actually considering getting an account on Wikipedia. Now, I'm debating whether or not I'm going to get an account, just with a crazy string so no one will know who I am, or if I'll just use Rim and then you guys could see what I actually do on there.
Yeah, do that. Pick some crazy name, and then if someone ever complains about it, anything you write, just pick a new crazy name. Just keep picking different crazy names every time.
The only people who complain are the Indigo Children people.
Well, good, they can shove it.
Because I think they've noticed that it's always me. Yeah. But anyway, you had some metabits too, didn't you?
Yes. Everyone who is listening to Geeknights, I'm going to probably have to say this every day this week, just for the people who listen to only one day.
Even though we learned there aren't so many of you.
That's another good thing you reminded me of. The first thing, everybody here who is listening to Geeknights, go right now, or the next time you're sitting at a computer, go to frontrowcrew.com, and on the right side of the page, there is a poll. Answer this poll. We want to know. And the poll will probably change every few weeks or so. So repeatedly go to frontrowcrew.com many, many times.
Yep, I imagine the polls will eventually include controversial topics that we'll then rant about.
Yes, but for now, there are things that we need to know to make the podcast better for you. So
yep, mostly because it's difficult to track stats.
Yes, so if you want the podcast to improve, go and vote in the polls on the side of the page.
Well, how could it improve? It's perfect. I mean, no one ever complains, ever.
Maybe people should complain by sending email to us, geeknights@frontrowcrew.com.
In fact, tonight's episode is proof that we do, in fact, read the email.
Yes, anyway. So, the forum. Our forum is a little different and a little more advanced and a little less advanced in some ways than PHPBB and VBulletin and all those other forums.
Yep, though I will say that most of the people who use it seem to really like it once they get the hang of it.
Yeah, our forum runs on Lusumo Vanilla software, which is wicked, almost Web 2.0, awesome forums of crazy.
You can say Lusumo, but you don't say Ubuntu.
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 All right, anyway.
Macadamia.
The way this forum works is instead of just joining, you apply for membership. And then within like a few hours, I notice that you applied for membership and I click approve. And you get an email saying, you are welcome to the forums. Come back and sign in.
Yep.
Well, it seems that some people have some sort of bad spam filter that will filter out completely not spam, because some people are dumb with email. They use like Hotmail or stupid shit like that.
Nah.
So, to the following people, you have been approved and you have accounts on our forum. Come sign in and talk with us many times.
Because it should just work. We didn't deny you or anything.
Yeah. And to all those people who do have accounts and have logged in at least once, bookmark the forum and keep coming back. And to anyone who doesn't have an account in the forum, come and apply. And if you don't get an email within 8 hours saying you have been approved membership, just send us an email and I will tell you if I approved you. So far, I have not rejected anybody.
Yep.
It's basically, I'm only going to reject you if you're obviously someone who's going to spam the forum or something.
And don't worry, Mr. Period does not have the power to deny you.
No, he doesn't. So, yeah, these are the people right now. Ace, Bellarm, Colin, Burkett C, Dak Rule 427, DeRoach, Digital Monkey, Fuzzy Ed, Spirit Fiend, Z-Mang 86, or Z-Man G 86, I don't know. The Reviewer, Manda, but M and D are in little square brackets. And there's someone who's obviously really, really trying to get into the forums. First, he tried to sign in as Flammer Guy. Then he tried to get another account as the Flamming Geek. And I think he thinks he was rejected because he hasn't been back, but I approved both of those accounts. Pick one of them, sign in, and I'll delete the other one. You were approved, you're not rejected, come back.
Yep, and for anyone who joined the forums early on, a long time ago when we first started and thought, hey, there's no one here, and never came back, there's a lot of people in there. In fact, someone on their own started a new flame war.
Yeah, there is talking in the forum pretty much on the hour. So if more people come, they'll be talking on the half hour, perhaps on the 10-minute. And it'd be cool.
So anyway, in the news, we have only one news today because we got some audio feedback from our Geeknights resident scientist, Peter Olsen.
Hooray.
Now, first off, the news. There was a lot of news over the weekend. We could talk about any number of things, and I think we're going to spread them out over the week because they're all fairly relevant or important. But this one isn't really a news per se, just a topic that's been coming up more and more lately. Black hats.
That means those hackers that aren't cool. They don't want to be your friend. They want to spam you and zombie you and all those other bad things.
See, a long time ago, it used to be that hackers were the good guys who messed with technology. And
they still are the good guys.
This is the old terminology. There are some people who really have a bug up their butt about this. And hackers were the good guys. They mess with technology. They protect you from crackers. Crackers were the guys who broke into things and did evil. And the terms all got mixed up, and then new terms came out. Now it's white hat, as in the good guys. Black hat, as in the bad guys. Red hat, as in that crappy Linux distribution. And ass hat.
You forgot gray hat. Those guys who are good guys, but then they're also bad guys. Oh my god.
Yeah, you can make up your own hats. But black hat is very well defined, and it basically means people on the internet or over networks who are in some way evil.
Usually spammers.
Yeah, that's pretty much the primary thing.
Spyware dudes.
And there's been a lot of news about attacks and extortion and DDoSs and things cropping up again.
Yeah.
This really hasn't been an issue for a long time, and it's starting to come back.
Well, the primary attack vector seems to be get a bunch of Windows machines and put a virus on them, which is not too hard to do, and connect them with some sort of IRC bot thing so that you go to an IRC channel and you type in some secret commands there, and the bots, all those thousands of Windows machines talk back to you in that IRC channel, and you can control them and make them do your bidding. You can say, all you Windows machines that I have collected, DDoS that guy. Or
DDoS stands for
denial of service, distributed denial of service.
I forgot the first one.
Yeah.
Distributed denial of service. It's like, say you got 1,000 PCs under your control, and you tell them all to ping one dude until he goes down.
Imagine if there was a guy who had a grocery store, and you basically brainwashed 1 million people on the street, and you said, "Hey, grocery store guy, either you give me all your money or I'm going to fill your grocery store with 1 million of these zombie people I brainwashed, and no one's going to be able to shop in your store ever again."
It's a decent analogy, and that's pretty much what happens.
Yep.
It's more common than you'd think.
A lot of times what happens is the people who are threatened or blackmailed or whatever you extorted, they won't say they were extorted because, well, if they do, the guy will just send the zombies anyway.
Yep. Plus, I mean, there's been a lot of talk about banks and financial institutions lately, and about, of course, this is kind of an old problem, how they won't let on if they get compromised. They'll just pay the guy because the police aren't going to track him down, and if they admit that they got hacked, that's the end of that bank.
Yeah, if a bank's like, yeah, we were hacked by this guy and he took $1 zillion, no one's going to put their money in that bank anymore. Everyone's going to be like, well, I'll put my money in this other bank, and that bank...
That and every hacker in the world is going to... Well, cracker in the world is going to attack that bank.
Yep. Oh, really? Your bank was hacked, eh? And successfully. And you paid the guy off, huh? Oh, you know what? I won't even bother hacking you. I'm just going to call you up and say I hacked you and ask for money.
Now, there was a time, I don't think many of our listeners are old enough to remember, but the early middling days of IRC, when IRC was like the primary mode of cool internet guy communication. Now IRC is a cesspool. Back then it was a cesspool.
Some of it's
too.
still okay, but not much.
Yeah, it's mostly a cesspool.
Mostly. There's a few places that are like, cordoned off, or like there's an open source area that's kind of okay.
Yep.
And there's some like, specialized geek channels here and there. But
yep, a lot of webcomics.
Most of it is just bleh.
Yeah. And back then, there was this rise of script kiddie, horrible assholes who would just... They basically had gang turf wars in IRC over channels. And they'd fight each other with these botnets and scripts and everything. And it got really bad. And then as technology improved and a lot of normal people who don't know about that sort of thing flooded the internet and IRC died, the problem disappeared, or at least retreated to the fringes of the internet. And if the news is to be believed, it's coming back.
Awesome.
Now, I'm of two minds on this, because one, I haven't been attacked at all. Like,
we won't
ever.
be. We're running Linux.
Ha
It's kind of a very, very difficult to attack us.
But two, I wonder, because when you see these articles, I almost get the feeling that they're being written by people who are being paid by various anti-spyware or antivirus companies or firewall companies who want people to be afraid so that they'll buy their products.
I agree, especially since Microsoft seems to actually be upping the security a little bit. And as time goes on, sure, there's still a hajillion Windows machines out there being compromised, but it's not because people don't have anything available to them to secure themselves. It's because people are stupid. So as it used to be, everyone was vulnerable, even us, using Windows to play games or something. We'd be out in the open and fucked. But now, the only people out in the open and fucked are the people who are stupid, and it's decreasing daily.
Because honestly, one thing that's really prevented attacks on most normal people out there is routers and NAT, which we're going to talk about today.
Hooray.
If you're behind a router, and the router's running NAT, so your computer is not directly connected to the internet with a bare IP, you're safe from 90% of the non-user-initiated attacks that are out there.
Yeah, the only way someone can get you then is if they trick you with something stupid, like you visit a website with IE that's got a thing on it, or you download an email attachment, or you click on a phishing scam, or something like that.
Yep. But I want to warn people that even though I think a lot of this black hat resurgence is overhyped and possibly false, the internet, if you go at it like a direct connection to the internet, is basically the Wild West. It is filled with the sea of dangerous things.
There are these pieces of software. I'm not going to explain too much of this because we can probably do a whole episode on it, called honeypots. And think of a honeypot as like this. You let's say that it was Pirate Town, and you had a treasure chest, but the treasure chest didn't really have treasure in it. It just looked like it had treasure in it. Yep. And whenever a pirate came to get the treasure, there was a little man inside the treasure chest who would write down which pirate came to check the treasure and what he tried to do.
So after a month, you've got a list of all the pirates.
Yeah, you got a list of all the pirates. You got a list of the techniques pirates are using to steal treasure. You got all kinds of information on pirates. So people put these honeypots out there on the internet and try to see who tries to hack it.
Millions and millions and millions.
Yeah, we're talking insane. Like, within days, you'll get crazy hacking attempts. Just boop, out of nowhere. Successful ones, who knows? But Just hacking attempts come all the time to random, brand new computers that had never been on the internet before. Guys would just discover these computers and hack them.
When we moved back into our IT in our apartment, Scott was building a new Windows XP.
Well, that was because I did it at a bad time. There was a worm going around.
Yeah, but
And
even then, it's still pretty dangerous out there.
It was real dangerous.
Of course, either running Linux or being behind a firewall saves you from 99% of that.
Or both.
Yeah.
Both is very good.
But anyway, that aside, we don't have another news today. Instead, we have the audio feedback, like I said. Now, I believe it was last Thursday, we talked a lot about evolution and various quote-unquote missing links that have been discovered recently.
Seems to be the hot topic of the past year or so.
Yep. And Peter had something interesting and enlightening to say about that.
Hooray.
Hey guys, it's Pete. Just thought I'd chime in about the topic of evolution, since it's come up this past Thursday and it's been in the news quite a bit this past week. Shed some light on it, do a little explaining, and just generally kind of expound a bit on evolution. I guess I'll start by defining it. Evolution, the word, as in the phenomenon of evolution, is defined as changes in the allele frequencies of a population over time. That's the modern definition. It used to be a lot simpler, just, changes in organisms, that sort of thing. But it's very specifically changes in allele frequencies. Alleles are basically settings of genes. Genes are the unit of inheritance. That's how characteristics get passed from one organism to its successive generation. An allele of a gene is sort of like a setting, basically, of that gene, like an option for that gene. A good example is eye color. If you have one gene that controls the eye color, you will have several alleles of that gene. Each instance of the eye color will be its own allele. So you have like a blue allele or a red allele, or green allele, or something like that. So changes in the allele frequencies of a population over time really just means sort of changes in the proportion of how often a given characteristic is expressed in a population. If something becomes more dominant while something else becomes less dominant, well, that's a form of evolution. And it's in a population of organisms. This is key to note: population, which is not necessarily a species as a whole. It just refers to a subset of a species that's typically geographically located, something like that. The way evolution works, the theory of evolution, describes the mechanisms by which it occurs. And we have quite a bit of information as to that, genetic inheritance and mutations and all this stuff. It's important to note that the way evolution works is by making several successive small changes over a period of time that eventually adds up to larger changes. It's actually a quote from Darwin about how you could show his theory wrong, and if it would be demonstrated that any complex organ existed which cannot possibly have been formed by numerous successive slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down, which is true. If you could have something that would not have evolved by this successive changes, then it's a blow to evolution there. That's basically how it operates. A lot of people separate microevolution and macroevolution. This is something I'll clear up for your benefit. Microevolution usually refers to evolution in microorganisms, small like bacteria and such. Macroevolution is evolution as it applies to large animals and such. They're the same process, exactly the same, 100% same process. The reason that people separate it out is because you can actually see evolution and observe it very readily in microorganisms, and that's because they have very quick generation times. In 24 hours, you can increase the population of a culture of E. coli by several orders of magnitude just overnight. You can't exactly increase the population of elephants by several orders of magnitude overnight. That's kind of why you don't see great sweeping, you won't see changes coming about that quickly in organisms that have long gestation periods, that sort of thing. Because obviously the only way these traits will arise is with reproduction and such. That's how genes get carried forward and expressed. And that's that. So the idea of evolution, the idea that organisms change over time has been around since about the mid-1700s. And basically the idea arose from observing like the fossil record and doing studies of animals and such, and what scientists found is that there's a lot of similarities between all different species and between their ancestor species. A lot of stuff they observed in, fossils from a long time ago these organs or these structures or analogs of these structures exist in creatures today. And they said, I wonder why that is. And from that, evolution kind of came about. And basically, we've had tons of evidence that changes actually occur and that we have shared characteristics and shared structures and common ancestry for some time. As I said, studying structures of past organisms, very specifically, if you were to look at, say, the skeleton of a fish, you'll notice it has some structures that look very similar to the things you would see in a human. It has like a definable rib cage and a spine and stuff. And actually, fish have a structure known as gill arches. They're kind of like these basically rib-like things that are used to support the gills themselves. Humans actually have that structure in them. It's up in the neck region, I believe. It's kind of those cartilaginous rings around your trachea. Those are gill arches. That's exactly what they are. They don't do anything for you because you don't have gills, but that's exactly what they are. There's a species of fish, I forget what it is off the bat, but it basically has a shoulder for its front flippers. It's kind of this round nub to which a fin is attached, and that structure was carried through to tetrapods and such. That's actually in the one animal that Rim mentioned on Thursday, the link between seagoing creatures and land-based creatures. It's kind of what it is. It's like this fish-like thing with some limbs to it, basically, or limb-like things. Well, really, your arm is just a heavily modified fin. That's all it really is. And the shoulder structure has been around for some time. And like I've said, we've observed enough fossils and skeletons and such to see these very similar structures. I mentioned the appendix on the forums. The appendix is a vestigial structure in humans, but it actually has function in some species today, and it had function in previous herbivorous species, progenitor organisms. But it's this thing we've just had kicking around for all this time. That's how evolution, just how evolution occurs. You start with one thing, you modify it a little bit, and it gets passed on. These links that have been recently found, they always talk about missing links and such, are really great to have, like the link between Homo erectus and Homo sapiens. It's great to have, but for most scientists, it's not really like necessary evidence that we've been digging for forever. We just keep digging for more evidence to further solidify our theories. But it's been a pretty solid theory for some time. We've known that links like that have existed. We even have living organisms that are kind of links themselves. The lungfish, for example, that's a great link between seagoing creatures and current land-based creatures. It can jump from pond to pond if it has to, and when a pond dries up, it can bury itself in mud, keep itself moist, and breathe air. It's an air-breathing fish. Has limb-like fins. So really, these discoveries that Rim has brought up, while they're nifty and such, scientists haven't had a problem believing that evolution is occurring. It's really only the creationists and other people like that really seem to have a problem with it, despite all scientific evidence that's been shown at them. And it's probably going to stay that way for a while. Every time some discovery like this is made, most people just basically move the goalposts. They say, well, you don't have a species in between these two now, and then you won't have a species in between those two, and et cetera, et cetera. But the theory itself, the concept that evolution occurs, has been set in science for some time. I mean, it's widely accepted, and the mechanisms for how it occurs are, always being studied, and we have a pretty good working understanding of that. So don't be too thrown off by anything you might read. Anytime the media says, ooh, missing link discovered, just remember that there really aren't missing links. There are just links. We've known about them for some time. So that's it. And yeah, I'm out.
So that aside, what is your thing of the day?
Oh, that's right. Well, we can't get enough of Chuck Norris, can we?
God damn it.
God damn.
God damn.
I got another Chuck Norris thing of the day, and there's not a goddamn thing you can do about it. This Chuck Norris thing of the day is brought to you by Soul Calibur 3.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, really. Because in Soul Calibur 3, apparently you have the ability to create brand new characters that look like you want and fight like you want and all that good stuff. So, someone had the foresight to create Chuck Norris.
Now, Chuck Norris seems to only have one move.
Huh. I wonder what move it could be.
I don't know. All I know is that if you watch the video, you will see that Chuck Norris can defeat any opponent with one swiftly placed roundhouse kick to the face.
Really? Does he have any other moves?
I don't think so.
No. How much damage did it do?
All of it.
All of it, you say?
Yes, all of it.
Huh. Well, you know what? If I was wanting to have any chance of surviving the pending Chuck Norris apocalypse, I would watch this video because it's really the only thing you can do to prepare yourself for the impending roundhouse doom.
Just remember, if you can see Chuck Norris, he can see you. If
Yep.
you cannot see Chuck Norris, you are seconds from death.
And if anyone tries to play with Chuck Norris in a Soul Calibur 3 tournament, I'll just forfeit right away. That's because it's just not fair.
All right. So along the line, we have two video game things of the day here. Now, mine, though, Scott's was Chuck Norris related, and mine is actually more baseball related.
Baseball just started like days ago.
Yeah. Well, basically, someone took the Game 6 of the 1986 World Series between
The Mets and the Red Sox.
and they reenacted it in NES RBI baseball.
Well, they reenacted the last inning. Now, for anyone who doesn't know...
No, it looks like they reenacted the entire game.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Did you skip to the last
I
inning?
skipped all around.
Oh, wow.
It's long.
Okay. Because for anyone who doesn't know, basically at the very last inning of this game, if the Red Sox had won this game, they would have won the World Series in 1986, and the curse would have been defeated then instead of 2 years ago. So you know who won already. I guess I spoiled it.
Yeah.
The only reason I know this is because I'm a Mets fan. If it was any other World Series, I wouldn't have known dick about it.
Yeah, all these guys did is they took the radio commentary from the game.
I think it was the TV commentary.
Doesn't matter.
All right.
They're usually similar.
Yeah.
And they took RBI baseball and they reenacted the game play for play. That's it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of fascinating to watch.
And the scary part is they must have, saved state and redid each thing until they got exactly the ball hit, the way they wanted to.
Yeah, because it's pretty much dead on.
It's really dead on, except for one thing. This is how close it is. The only difference was in the ninth inning, the first baseman makes, an error and the ball goes by him. Instead of that, the ball, was in front of him instead of behind him.
Yeah.
That's how accurate this is. So... if you've never experienced the insane tension that this was a pretty good game of baseball. I mean, in terms of games of baseball in history, this is a pretty good one to watch. So this is a pretty entertaining way to watch it if you've never seen it.
Yep. Now, anyway, moving on to our main bit. I believe we actually got the idea for this from some reader feedback.
Yeah, someone finally listened to us and emailed us like I've been telling you to do. I don't know how many times this episode, because this is the Scott tells everyone to do feedback episode.
So here is proof that if you email us, we read it. We don't always respond, but we read it.
Yep. I just responded, actually. Today I got an email from Greg Carpenter. Hey, Greg, what's up?
Yo.
He gave us some ideas for some Monday episodes, some of which were good and some of which were not so good. But anyway, we're going to do two of them today. One, because one of them is actually a good one, and the other one will take us 5 seconds, so we figured, why the hell not?
All right, so, Scott, why don't you ask us the question that he asked?
Well, he didn't ask a question. He just gave ideas for Monday shows. So the first idea for Monday shows I want to talk about was, what certifications do you recommend people get? Now, if you don't know, a certification is like this A+ and Cisco and MS whatever,
MSC.
MSCE. What it is if you're a computer or IT professional, you can go pay money to study this thing and take a test, and if you pass the test, you get this little badge of honor that you can put on your resume and your business card and all that. You can say, I am a Microsoft certified computer engineer, or I am a Cisco certified blah, blah, blah. And
one, they cost a lot of money. Two, the tests aren't really that difficult. They're just annoying. And three, the only companies that care about them are companies that you probably don't want to work for.
Yeah. Basically, if you're going to be working for a smart person, someone who knows about computers, and is not a giant evil company or a giant pile of stupid crap, you don't need a certification. In fact, those people, smart people, would look and say, wow, you have a bunch of certifications. You must be stupid as shit.
Yep. I mean, basically, if you have a degree, as in a Bachelor of Science in computer technology or IT or information technology, computer science, anything like that, you're pretty much golden anyway. If you don't have a degree, certifications are better than nothing. If you have a degree, they're useless.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a chance to get one for relatively little money and little time spent, like if there's someone giving out like free tests or certification tests, $5,
Or your company says, hey, take the certification and we'll promote you and we'll pay for all the time you spend learning it.
yeah, go for it. But getting certifications to like try to boost your resume, it's not a good idea.
Yeah, in fact, even if you have certifications, I'd put them on your resume, but I wouldn't put them in any sort of place of honor, and I wouldn't bring them up while I was at the interview.
Unless someone asked about them, in which case I'd be perfectly honest. I would say, oh, those certifications, yeah, I just took that one because someone paid for it, and yeah, that one was real easy, whatever.
Yeah, or if the company you're applying for is dumb.
Yeah. If I was hiring someone and you came in and introduced yourself as I am a someone certified, I'd be like, all right, you're done.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, that's
So
all we got to say on certifications.
Yep, so we killed a show, and now we can do another show on home networking.
Yep. Oh, well, first, I forgot to mention the movie guys.
All right.
This will probably be the last time we mention them unless we interact with them again. Which
I'm sure we will.
I'm sure we will.
They're cool.
Yeah. So remember last week, you might not have listened to the episode, but the guy Rich from our forum, who also does a podcast of his own called Movies You Should See, where they talk about movies that you should see. They're a bunch of middle-aged British people.
You said middle-aged again. She's going to freaking kill you.
I know, isn't that great?
See, I'm okay. I agree with her now. It's not 32 isn't middle-aged because the Count of Monte Cristo was badass, and he was like 40-something.
Yeah, I figure people live to like 80, 90 these days, so 40, 45 is middle-aged, mathematically speaking. But
I get my line, old is older than me.
yeah, so I'm going to be 24 in less than a month, so if you're 30-something, you're old to me. You might be young to my mom, who's like 50-something, but you're old to me. So
Yeah, I think I'm pretty much the line because of the inner group of the front row crew, I'm the oldest one of this generation. And then, I mean, we have our friends like Scott Johnson's a little older, and Colin's like 1,000.
he's like 10 billion. But the way I see it, if my mom is 50-something and she's old, and I'm 20-something and I'm young, if you're 30-something, you're in the middle. Middle age. Anyway,
All right.
that was a tangent. A tangent of a tangent. Oh
Yeah.
my god. All right. Back to the point. We did a guest spot on their movies podcast where we talked about Attack the Gas Station, which is awesome.
Yes, you should see it. It's a movie you should see.
Yes, Attack the Gas Station is a movie everyone should see, especially if you're a geek. And if anyone is here because they listen to movies you should see and they told you to come listen to us, well, that's awesome. But now, it works both ways. If you listen to us and you like movies, go listen to Movies You Should See. If you can go to simplysyndicated.com/moviesyoushouldsee.html.
Plus, it's very good that we know of these people and that they're cool because now we are much less inclined to do our Thursday cop-out, which is if it's Thursday and we don't want to do a show, we'll just talk about a movie we've seen.
Yeah.
Now we probably won't do that.
Yep. I mean, we were going to probably do at some point an Attack the Gas Station episode, but now we don't have to.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Plus, their commentary was slightly more erudite than what we would say about Attack the Gas Station.
Yes, but I was surprised that they did not know what mise-en-scène means, which is the first thing I learned in the only film class I've ever taken. And they didn't even pronounce it correctly. Yet they think they should be able to have a movie podcast.
Oh, you're bringing out the smack talk, eh?
Well, no, actually, they recognize in their podcast that who are we to have a movie podcast? We don't know any. And, of course, who are we to have we are professionals at Geeknights.
Yeah.
So, yes, we are the ones to have a geeky podcast, being professional geeks of the highest alpha geek character.
Yeah, we'll stand by that, too, if anyone wants to
if anyone wants to challenge us to, like, a geek duel to see, who is geekier and more intelligent and all that, unless you're, like, some crazy super geek.
Unless you have a webcomic that gets more than 1 million readers per day.
Yeah, but then we'll only bow to you in certain areas. Like if Gabe came up to us, we would only bow to his art geekness. We would not bow to anything else.
His video game geek is something to be feared.
Oh, it is true. His video game geek is feared. But I don't know. It's probably equal to mine. Well, he does have more hours, but he plays a lot of crap games. See, it comes down to that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But We could probably beat 90% of geeks in any geek category.
Not to be, full of hubris or anything.
If we ever have our own convention, the GACs, if you will,
The
then we will have to have the Geek Megathon, where people will have to challenge us to like 10 tests of geek skill. And I'm sure they'll all lose in the board game round, so it doesn't matter.
Anyway.
Right, our episode is on home networking.
Yeah, if you've listened through all that just because you wanted to get to the home networking part, I'm sorry, but it's Monday, and Mondays tend to have a lot of cruft.
Yeah. We're going to, basically what we do is we have the cruft on Monday, and then we summarize the cruft Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday into smaller bits. Sorry, Monday, guys.
Yep, but
and
today
girls.
is home networking day, and one, because we got the question in the feedback email, and two, because at work today, I was asked some fairly mundane questions about home networking by my office mate, the cool Korean guy.
You seem to get that asked quite a bit, or at least you say you do.
Well, because one, while I do system administration and like a lot of Linux and server stuff where I work at IBM and pretty much all the jobs I've had, I went to school for networking. I concentrated in like networking, architecture, and like high level, awesome, cool routing stuff. And I've never actually done that for money.
I was just about to say, how often have you used that knowledge?
I mean, I am capable on my own of fully planning out architecting and wiring, like all the way down to pulling the cables if I have to, like an entire office building. But no, I don't do any of that. I admin freaking like, Linux servers and databases and crap.
Yeah, it does seem to be a common question now. Like, if someone has something wrong with their, computer, or they find out you're a computer guy, one of the first things I seem to get asked all the time is, "Oh, I just bought a wireless router. How do I make it go?" Or that sort of thing.
Yeah. Now, I could go on and on about tech support for people who aren't technological, and we're going to do a whole episode on that someday, because I have thousands of anecdotes.
Oh my God, millions.
The only thing I'll say now is that you don't ask your dentist friend to rip your tooth out at a party. Don't ask me to fix your router at a party. I'll charge you the same amount the dentist charges.
Exactly.
But anyway, even though I end up helping people anyway, because it's usually not that difficult.
And because it doesn't require materials like a dentist does.
Usually. I've had people ask me to, like, wire their house.
Oh.
And that requires a lot of equipment.
I just give you 2 middle fingers right there.
But home networking, anyone who's considering building home network, who has a home network and doesn't know if it's good or it has problems, the best thing I can tell you right now is that it's a good time to be alive. Networking, unless you need to do something interesting, is incredibly simple nowadays. Most devices that you buy are literally just plug it in and it works.
Especially if you got Windows or a Mac. And if you have Linux, you're already smart enough you don't need to know about whatever.
And even if you don't, even like Ubuntu just freaking works.
Yep.
But I'm going to talk mostly about the actual infrastructure of a home network. Cable modem, routers, wireless, switches and hubs, and why one of them is spawn of Satan and one of them is the holiest of holies.
Holiest of holies.
I really like switches.
Wires.
Yeah. What kind of wires, all the cable-y crap.
Network cards.
Because, it's really simple to me and people who have studied this sort of thing, but while it's simple, just plug the stuff in and make it work, it's not trivial. You have to know something. So hopefully I can shed some light on this topic. Now, one, I'm going to assume you have broadband. If you don't have broadband, you don't have a home network.
Yeah, if you have dial-up, what the hell? How are you downloading podcasts?
Yeah,
wow, you must be really freaking dedicated.
God damn. We did have one guy download our podcast dial-up a couple times.
Really?
Yeah, a guy at work who doesn't have broadband.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Wow.
He said he'd listen again if we ever got James Randi on the show.
You should give him a CD instead of,
It's not a bad idea.
Yeah, DVD, man. Whatever.
Right. Anyway, home networking. So, broadband. I'm also not going to talk about the different types of internet connections or broadband because it doesn't matter. We could do a whole separate episode on that, and it's actually complicated. But you've got some sort of networking, some sort of DSL modem or cable modem or something. And there's a little Cat5 cable that comes out of it.
The Cat5 cable looks like a phone cable, but it's bigger. And
Yep.
it has 8 little wires in it.
Now, the only other thing I want to say before I get started is that if you have any sort of USB network thing, if you plug into any networking equipment with a USB cable, that's bad, and you should probably not do it that way. You should listen to me and do it the way I'm about to say.
Yeah, if you have a cable modem or a DSL or something, and it's connected to your computer with a wire that is similar to the one your mouse and your keyboard and your printer and your scanner use, and doesn't look like a phone cable, That's bad.
I just had this horrible image of someone using like PS2 or AT connections.
A USB has this little 3 symbol with an arrow and a... God, if you don't know what USB is, go to Wikipedia and type in USB.
If you know what USB is, stop listening to Geek Nights.
Yeah, I mean, come on.
At least Geek Nights Mondays.
Yeah.
All right, so I could talk about so much. It's so simple. Quite literally, if you have one computer, we'll start with that. If you have one computer and you want to hook it up to the internet, you have your cable modem. Now, you're going to want to plug a network cable, a normal network cable. Don't worry about any special. You just need a normal network cable. Anything you buy in the store will work, as long as it does not say crossover.
Mm-hmm.
You plug it into the hole in the cable modem, or DSL modem, and then you plug it into the uplink hole on your router. If you don't have a router, buy a router.
You should buy a router. I recommend the Linksys WRT54G. That is probably the best router you can buy for a home network.
Yeah, and it's not like we're paid to shill or anything. Everyone agrees on the internet. It's the best router in the world, dollar for dollar.
Linksys use Linux for the software of the router, and it's all open source, and there's a million firmwares. And this router's just awesome.
It's also really cheap.
It's really cheap. It does everything you need. It's perfect. They sell it everywhere. It just get it. It's easy. It works.
All right. Now, you have the router. You plug the cable modem into the uplink port of the router. It'll say uplink on it. And then you plug your PC into one of the other ports on the router.
Doesn't matter which one.
And everything will probably just work.
If it doesn't just work, your Linksys router comes with directions. Read those directions and do what they say. It usually involves putting in a CD and pushing 2 buttons.
Yep. Now, what I'm going to keep doing is I'm going to explain, just kind of describe all the different setups, and then I'll go and explain what each of the things is and how it works on a very broad level. Now, say you have 2 computers, this is when it gets a little tricky, because at this point, you're going to need something else. Now, you can just plug 2 computers into the router, and that'll work fine. However, the router has a switch in it if you use a normal router, just because that makes things easier. However, the switch is usually using logic in the router, or it's somehow taxing the router. You're basically putting more stress on the router, and as a result, your connection might be a little slower. But if you don't care, it doesn't matter. You can plug as many computers into your router as it has holes.
Yeah. Well, except, of course, for the one hole that goes to the cable modem or DSL modem.
Yep.
The thing is it won't make it that much slower unless you plan on having everyone do something BitTorrent at the same time. It's not going to hurt you. Don't worry about it.
Now, if you have a bunch of computers in your house, you're going to want some switches. Now, the setup here is very simple again. Cable modem to your router. Then one cable from your router to the switch in the uplink port of the switch.
So, you have the cable modem still goes to the uplink on the router, but then you take a cable from any of the normal computer holes on the router to the uplink on the switch.
And then plug every computer you have into all the other ports on that switch.
Mm-hmm.
If you have too many computers, plug another switch into that switch.
Or plug another switch into the router.
Yep. The key here is that you can basically just keep expanding your network as much as you want as long as you use switches.
Mm-hmm.
Not many people sell hubs anymore, but don't buy a hub. Make sure it says the word 10/100, it might say 1,000, switch. You also want it to say full duplex. If you buy a Linksys, you can't go wrong. In fact, I would recommend buying Linksys for everything in your house. They pretty much make the best home networking equipment at the best price.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you can get a cheap Netgear thing, but that's like big and metal, and it can scratch furniture and whatever.
But what I just said, that's it. That's basically all you have to do to have a home network. Now, you might wonder, well, Rim, why are you going to talk about it? Or, Rim, my network doesn't work. Here's where the fun parts come in. Now, a router, the Linksys router that you've got between you and the cable modem, does a lot of things that you might not realize, and you might have to set some of these up. Again, there are instructions that came with your router. It's very simple to do. I'm not going to explain the commands you type or whatever. What the router does is you get an IP address. I assume you know what an IP address is from your internet provider. They give it to you via a protocol called DHCP, Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol.
Usually.
Yeah, 99% of the time. Again, your ISP will also give you instructions as to how you'll get your IP address. Follow their instructions.
Yep.
Now, you'll get an IP address, and that is your IP to the world. That is your address as far as the internet is concerned. When you talk to someone else, it goes from that IP address. When someone talks to you, if they ever dial in that IP address, it goes to your computer.
If you have 5 computers, as far as the internet's concerned, all those 5 computers are sharing that one IP address.
Well, I'm getting to that because as far as the internet is concerned, there's only one computer.
Right.
There's no sharing.
That's true.
Now, that's fine if you have one computer. Now, if you have 2 computers and you want them both to be on the internet at the same time, that's not going to work. You only have one IP address. And until recently, your only option was to buy another IP address from your internet service provider.
That sucked ass. You can still do it, actually.
Yep, and sometimes it's useful, but it usually cost quite a bit of money.
And it sucks ass.
And then you needed a switch or something so you could all plug into the cable modem. And depending, if you know that you need an IP address for something, then you don't bother listening to the rest of this. You know what you're doing. But if you have no idea what I'm talking about right now, it's good to be alive, like I said before. Nowadays, instead of having to buy one IP address for every computer you have, you buy the router that Scott just mentioned, and you plug it in, just like I said. And the router will do something called network address translation, or NAT. Now, technically what it does is port address translation, but I've never talked to an actual network professional who uses those terms. They use NAT to mean everything.
It has Pat. Woo! Way to go, Pat.
Now, basically what it does is computers have ports on IP addresses. So you connect to a website, you type in www.whatever.com. The DNS resolves that name to a IP number, an IP address, and then you connect to that computer on port 80, because port 80 is the port that everyone agreed is where web pages will come from. And there's a different port for every protocol, and then there's thousands and thousands and thousands of high, or they're called ephemeral ports, that you just use whenever you need to use a port for something. Anytime you ever connect to another computer, you do it on one of their ports from one of your ports. Now, this is very handy that there's so many of them, because you only have one IP address to the outside world. But that IP address has a whole bunch of ports.
65,000 something billion?
Yeah, 65,535, give or take.
Unsigned integer.
Yeah. Now, what it'll do, and I'm going to explain this as non-technically as I can. You have your IP address to the internet. Inside of your network, all of your computers have other IP addresses that usually your router will just give to you. You don't have to worry about it. Because basically you can set your router up to do the DHCP thing that I said earlier. Read the instructions for your router. So you'll have say you have 4 computers. You'll have 4 IP addresses that are internal to your network using special IP addresses that only exist inside of little networks like yours. These addresses are special in that they're not routable on the internet. Nothing on the internet can ever route these special IP numbers. So your network is basically completely on its own. Now, say 10.10.10.1 is the IP address of your first computer, and you want to connect to /. So it'll go to the router, and the router will perform a translation on it, and say it comes out of port 1000 on your computer. Your computer just picks that port, and it connects to the net. It goes to the router. The router will say, all right, 10.10.10.1 wants to connect to /. On port 80. I will send this thing to /. On port 80 from my port 9000. Now, every time something comes back to the router from the outside internet on port 9000, it knows, all right, anything coming on port 9000 is supposed to go back to computer 10.10.10.1, because he's the one I gave that port to. I hope that made sense. Basically, it'll divvy up ports, and it'll basically take care of the traffic that's going in and out, and it'll on its own know which of your computers the traffic from the outside needs to go to. That way, all of your computers can share one IP address on the internet.
Yep. Now,
every router does this.
Mm-hmm. I don't know, but if you decide that you want to have 70,000 computers on your network all visit a web page at the same time, you're not going to do with that little router.
Yeah, well, if you've got that many, you really need some Cisco hardware.
Yeah, you need something else.
Even though our Linksys is Cisco.
Linksys technically is Cisco. That is correct.
Yep. Though when I say Cisco hardware, I mean routers bigger than my computer.
Exactly.
Now, NAT, almost all of you out there are probably using NAT. And there are a lot of problems that people have with the internet that they don't realize. Like, they'll wonder why BitTorrent is slow on their computer, but it's fine for all their friends. Or if I'm playing a game on a Half-Life game on Steam, how come John in the other room can't connect, but as soon as I disconnect, he can? Stuff like that. And it all comes down to the fact that port address translation is not perfect. The main thing is, if a request comes in, if someone tries to connect to you and there's not a connection already established by the NAT in the router doesn't know what to do with that packet, so it drops it. So if you're running a game or something, like BitTorrent's a good example. Your BitTorrent needs to be able to receive connections from the outside world, meaning a random person will connect to your IP address on a certain port and say, hey, I'm here to do some BitTorrent with you. I'm going to give you some files and seed. Woohoo. Now, because you don't know that guy's going to connect to you and you haven't connected to him before, it comes in on whatever port you've got set up for BitTorrent, and your router doesn't know who that port belongs to. Which of your 4 computers should he send it to? He can't send it to everyone. That's dangerous. So he just drops it.
Yep.
So if you have BitTorrent, and I know a lot of people use Azuria, so I'll use that as an example, and you only get the yellow smiley faces, you never get the green smiley face ever, that's your problem. It means that you can still use BitTorrent, but you can't ever get an unsolicited connection from someone else to you. And the way around this is called port forwarding or port tunneling. I can't really tell you how to do it because it's another thing you'll have to read the manual for your router or search on the internet. It's very simple. All it does is you'll be able to specify, hey, anything that comes in on port whatever to the router automatically goes to that same port on whatever computer I specify.
So in other words, let's say I want to run a game server, and the game server runs on port 6969. I tell the router, hey, if anyone comes around to this router and they want to talk to port 6969, you tell them to go to that computer over there because that is the game server.
Yep.
The problem with this is if another computer wants to use port 6969, well, you can't do that really.
Yep. Now, I won't want to get into the details of NAT because technically it could, but not. It's really complicated.
That's the part you don't need to know.
Yeah, that's the part I need to know because I'm the one who sets all this crap up for
You'll
people.
never have that problem. If you want to run 2 game servers, put one on 6969 and one on 6970.
Yep.
You'll be just fine.
Now,
you got 65,000 to choose from. You can't go wrong.
Now, the best advice I can give right here in terms of problems with NAT and PAT and all that sort of thing is that here is a list of the applications that tend to be affected by this sort of thing. So if you're running something like this and you have trouble involving connecting to people or getting connections or slow connections or what have you, it's probably a NAT issue. Google around on port forwarding and port tunneling and then you'll be able to fix it. A lot of voice over IP stuff like Skype, BitTorrenty things, any sort of peer-to-peer application, instant messenger file transfers tend to be hit by this a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Certain kinds of FTP servers actually get hit by this. I don't know how many of you know, but FTP, everyone uses FTP, right? There's 2 kinds of FTP, passive mode and active mode. I'm not even gonna explain the differences, but sometimes FTP doesn't work. And if it doesn't, a firewall or a NAT is probably the reason.
Mm-hmm.
And games, game servers, and even a lot of game clients. Steam in particular has a lot of trouble with ports.
Anything that any program where it you don't really know what port stuff is using, but if there's a program that says I use port this number, or which port number do you want to use because it asks you for a number, those are the programs to watch out for. Other programs, they don't really care what port they use; they'll just do it.
Yep. And generally, it's programs that in any way act as a server. Any program that wants someone else to be able to connect to you unsolicited from the outside needs some sort of tunnel through the NAT to work.
Yep. So with a NAT, you can go to every computer out on the internet and say, hey, what's doing? Hey, what's doing? Hey, what's doing? But if anyone wants to come to you and say, hey, how you guys doing over here? That's when the NAT gets in the way. So if you want people on the internet to be able to come over to you and talk to you without you going and inviting them or talking to them first, that's where the NAT gets in the way.
Yep. If anything else, if you know you have a problem like this, find some geek and say, hey, I'm having trouble with my NAT. That way he'll probably be able to help you.
Instead of saying, hey, my game server doesn't work, then they really don't know what you're talking. Could be you're just stupid, you don't know how to set up a game server.
Yeah. Plus, as a geek, I will say that the more effort and due diligence a person puts in before they come to me for help, the more likely I am to help them.
Mm-hmm.
Like if someone says, my internet's down, I'll punch them. But if someone says, my internet's down, I tried rebooting my router, I tried unplugging everything and plugging it back in, I tried doing that IP release renew thing you told me about and it still doesn't work, then I'll probably help.
Yep. One more cool thing. I've talked a lot about Hamachi all over the place. This is probably a good place to tell people what Hamachi does.
Yep. Now, one, if you're using Linux, you have to do some kernel things to get it working sometimes. So
Yeah, if you don't have the tunnel kernel module, whatever. But
Yeah.
ignore that. I'm only going to talk about it on the home networking level.
yeah, and on Windows, it's so trivial to use, I could cry.
Yeah, so there's a thing called a virtual private network, a VPN. People have talked about it. You might have heard it.
Yep, your router might actually have stuff to do it built in.
Or
And-
your routers usually don't have stuff to do it, but what they usually have is a thing that allows it to happen if
Yep.
you have the other tools that make it go.
You can even buy special VPN boxes that'll do it all for you.
You can buy hardware things that do it. You can buy all kinds of software that does it. There are a million ways to do it, but Hamachi, I say, is the best way because it is free and perfect.
Now,
Anyway,
well, remember how I said that when you have your private network behind the net, you have your own special IP addresses that no one else can see, and they're secret and not routable. This basically lets you, even if you're out on the internet, connect to your little private numbered network all by itself as though you were there physically.
so here's an example. In our house, I have a web server. You can't visit this web server. It has web pages on it, but you can't visit it.
In fact, it has prototypes of Geeknights.
It does. If you were to find out the IP address of our cable modem and visit it with your web browser, you would get nothing. Because the web server is hidden behind the network. And you're coming around asking for stuff, and we didn't forward the port. If I forwarded the port and I said, hey, router, if anyone comes looking on port 80, send them to the web server on port 80, then you would be able to see what was going on. Now, if you use Hamachi, this is really cool, or any other VPN if you can get one to work, but Hamachi, I already said, is the best. What it does is there's some Hamachi server out on the internet somewhere, and you say, hey, Hamachi server, blah, blah, blah. It talks a bunch of mystic crap. It's all magic that we don't understand. We don't care.
Yeah.
At least you don't care.
Yeah, we understand it mostly.
Yeah. And what happens is you turn Hamachi on, and all of a sudden, like magic, your computer is now somehow, not really, but essentially, inside our network. It's as if you plugged your computer into our router. But no, you're far away on the other side of the world.
And don't be scared by Hamachi. It's really, really, really simple to use. And as far as we can tell, and as far as a lot of experts can tell, it's really, really, really secure.
Yep. The only problem with it is now you're exposing all your ports to our network. So if you come on to our network with, through Hamachi, then
it's just like your computer's in the next room, and I could do all sorts of things to you.
So you want to be nice and tight before you Hamachi with some strange people. And if you're going to use Hamachi so you can get into your own, that's what I use it for. So when I'm out and about the world, I can get into the home network and do things on all the computers in the house from far away. If you're going to do that, make sure that, your computer's in your house. If anyone accidentally busts into your Hamachi and comes inside your house, they don't have much to do.
Yep. Now, there are software solutions to this, too. I mean,
Hamachi is a software solution.
Yeah, but I mean, there are other, direct software solutions of take control of a computer, screen scraper type things.
Yeah.
VNC was popular.
VNC, PC Anywhere, blah, blah, blah.
Yep. We're not really going to talk about those because Hamachi, in my opinion, makes most of them obsolete.
Yep. I mean, if you use Hamachi, Linux, and XDMCP, or Hamachi and Windows Remote Desktop
I don't think
together,
anyone who's still listening knows what that is.
Windows Remote Desktop?
No, the other one.
XDMCP?
Yeah.
Anyone who uses Linux knows what XDMCP
Yeah, anyone who
is.
uses Linux probably isn't still listening to this episode.
Yeah, but the people who use Windows using remote desktop and terminal services, use those combined with Hamachi and you're set.
Yep. Now, in terms of the home network, and we talked about how to get to your network from the outside and about kind of how it works and the troubles, wired and wireless and moving the wires around is probably the last big thing.
Oh, we got to talk about wireless, yeah.
Because anything else, you can just read your manual. I mean, seriously, most of the information that I didn't say it because it's right there in the frickin' manual for whatever you just bought. Now, there are crossover cables and there are straight-through cables on networking. If you can find any geek near you to make the cables for you, ask them to and pay whatever they ask you to pay. Because network cables literally cost me about 2 cents a yard to make. They're
Network
so
cables
cheap.
at Staples are a ripoff. Network cables at Home Depot are great because what you do at Home Depot is you buy like a mile of network cable in a giant spool, and then you put the little plastic caps on the end of it and you cut it yourself.
In fact,
However, if you don't have the skill or the tools to cut it and put the plastic bits on the ends of the cables properly, then you need someone else to do it.
and the tools are actually kind of expensive if you want ones that work.
Yeah, but once you get one tool, you don't need any more.
Yep. Now, there's actually a funny story about that because I bought a giant, 1,000-foot spool of network cable back at RIT, and I stuck it under my desk. And one day I was sitting on Slashdot, and Scott was sitting next to me on his computer on Slashdot, and the new poll appeared, and it was, how much cable is under your desk?
Oh, I remember that.
Now,
I remember that.
Now, they obviously meant, all the cables connecting all your crap together. And I'm sitting there, and I'm thinking, and I'm like, I got about 10, 15 meters of cable. And I said this out loud, and Scott looks at me, he's like, Rem, look at your feet. And I look down, and my feet are resting on this 1,000-foot spool of cable.
Yep. We still have it. We haven't used it all yet, have we?
We're down to the last, 50 feet.
Oh, no.
I'm going to buy another one.
All right.
Now, get the cable somehow. If you get a geek to make them, make them. If you want to learn how to make them yourself, it's pretty easy to do so on the internet. I'm not going to explain it here. Maybe I'll show someone if we ever do a video podcast.
Yeah, go to Google and type in how to make Cat5, how to crimp Cat5 cables, how to make network cables.
Yep.
You'll find it pretty easily. You just have to remember the order of the colors. That's the tricky part.
Yep, it's no, I'm not gonna.
Green and white, red and white, orange, brown. But I don't fucking know.
No, white and orange, white and green, blue, white and blue, green, white and brown.
Yeah, that one.
That's the B one.
I knew it was green and white and brown and shit.
Yeah. All right. Which colors are used and which ones aren't?
Every other one.
No. Orange, white and green, white and green are used. Nothing else is used in standard Ethernet.
Well, power over Ethernet, the others get used sometimes.
Yeah, or in the old way to do gigabit over Cat3 and all sorts of crazy.
Yeah, here's a geeky fact that you may not know. A network cable has 8 wires in it. Only 4 of them are actually used.
And each wire is not actually a wire used on itself. It's a wire that is used in pair with another wire.
So instead of, it uses 2 wires to make one, basically. It's magic.
Yep, and 4 of the wires aren't used at all. And, except in special circumstances that you'll never run into for now.
At least you'll never run into. So
however,
if someone gives you a network cable and it only has 4 wires in it, don't worry.
However, it is mandated by the standard that all 8 wires be there for various reasons. So, if you get a cable that only has 4 in it, that means whoever made it skimped their ass off.
Yeah, and you should probably just, use it. It'll work, but replace it when you have time.
Yeah, because that means it's a cheap cable. Super cheap.
Cheap crap.
Now, when it comes to buying cable one, regardless, you want straight-through cables. No normal person will ever actually need a crossover cable.
A crossover cable is like if you want to plug 2 computers together directly and do something stupid.
Or if you want to plug a computer directly to the Ethernet adapter on a real giant, in-the-closet router.
Mm-hmm.
Because a router is basically a computer. So if you want to connect to a router directly, you have to use a crossover cable.
In fact, if you want to be really cool, you don't need to buy a router. Just buy a computer and put a bunch of network cards in it, and then put Linux on it.
Even if, IP chains, IP tables, I could do a whole episode on how to set that stuff up.
There's a Linux distribution called IP Cop. And if you install that, it turns your computer into a router/firewall.
It's really good.
It's really good, and it's really easy, but you have to know about networking to make use of it. And you have to sacrifice an entire computer.
Yeah.
And you have to have a whole bunch of network cards in that computer.
But basically, the routers that you buy from Linksys actually have a switch in them, and then the router's inside, and you never connect directly to the router. So you don't need a crossover cable in that situation. In fact, like I said, you'll never need a crossover cable unless you connect 2 computers together. All the other situations are things you'll never run into. So you want straight through. 2, you want Category 5 Type E, Cat 5e.
Cat 6, Cat 7, Cat 8, some of them are real, some of them are fake. Ignore them. They're trying to get your money.
Yeah, if the cost is the same or almost the same, you might as well get Cat 6 because it'll run gigabit more reliably. But you're probably not even going to run gigabit to begin with because basically there's Cat 3 and there's Cat 5. Those are the 2 standards right now. Cat 3 is obsolete. There are 2 speeds that are used commonly in Ethernet, 10 base T and 100 base T. The standard is rapidly becoming 100 base. You need at least Cat 5 to run 100 base. You do not need more than Cat 5 to run 100 base.
If you have Cat a billion, it'll still run at 100. It won't go any faster.
Yep. And while gigabit, 1000 base T is coming out and it's becoming more and more accepted, if you don't know you have a reason to get it, you don't have a reason to get it. As of now, that might change rapidly, but right now you don't need it.
Really, the only reason to ever have gigabit is if you're doing crazy things on your network, because to fill that 100 is insane. You would have to do forwarding of 3D applications over the network to use all of the 100. And in fact, if you're doing that, you should probably get the 1,000. But other than that, 1,000 is just a waste of your time.
Now, if you're going to run cable, like actually run it through your walls, I'm going to have to do a whole nother episode on that because there's all sorts of fire codes and safety and all sorts of stuff that you'd have to worry about.
Call a professional.
Yep, like me.
Or an electrician.
If you're interested, I could do an episode on how to do that because I know how to do that very well. I've run cable in walls before. But the only thing I'll say right now is that if anything else, if you don't remember anything, if you're ever going to run cable inside your walls, there are two basic grades of cable to worry about if you buy a spool somewhere. There's plenum grade and there's riser grade. Riser grade is what you plug your computer into. That's what you see across the ceiling in a computer lab somewhere. That's what you see laying on the floor. The only difference is that plenum grade will not give off toxic gases if it catches fire.
Yep.
So if you're running wires through your house in the walls, you must use plenum grade. I cannot stress this enough. It is dangerous to use anything else because it does not meet fire code and you can get in trouble.
Yep.
Also, you could die. Not really. It's not really that dangerous, but
it's bad.
It's as dangerous as
It's bad enough that someone would make a law about it.
It's about as dangerous as semi-shoddy electrical work would be. There's also shielded and unshielded. You need unshielded. You don't need shielded unless you're doing something interesting.
Like magnets.
Or running it through a wall where there's power, or all sorts of things. When we do our stuff on how computers work, our big series that's coming up, I'll go into great detail about the cables.
Yeah, just if you're doing wiring between computers and the router all over your house, try to keep it simple. You know, if you can find a way to just go through one wall, do that. If you can find a way to go around the edge of the room, do that. Try not to go in the walls. It's a lot easier, and it leaves you a lot more options if you want to move stuff around.
Yep, if you're going through the walls, you basically have to plan that from the start, and you'll basically want to build a wiring closet and all sorts of fun stuff.
Yeah, or get a house that's already wired, and then put your computer near all the jacks in the walls.
Now, the basic advice I'll give for running wires if you have a lot of computers is that you want to have your big old switch in a central location and run all the cables to that. The only exception is if, say, the cable modem comes in upstairs, like in our house, and you've got two computers up there, they plug in directly to it. But then downstairs, you've got 3 more computers. Instead of running 3 cables down there, all over the stairs or whatever, run one and put a switch on the end of it.
Yep.
Other than that, wiring's pretty simple unless you want to do it all fancy-like. Now, the other option, if you don't want to run wires, is wireless.
Wireless rules.
Now, if you have a laptop, it'll just work. Don't worry about it. If you have a PC and you want to put a wireless thing in it, I'll warn you that wireless network cards for PCs are expensive.
And they suck, most of them.
Yep. Now, the other option there is you can buy a wireless bridge, which will basically, you put one end of it upstairs where your connection comes in, plugged into your router, or sometimes the router will do it. You put the other end downstairs, and a wire comes out of it, or there's a switch on it, and basically it acts like a wireless wire between those 2 points.
Yep.
A lot of them use 802.11a.
Ooh.
Now, I'm not going to go into great detail about wireless in general, other than here's a few basic things to keep in mind. 1, the things that block wireless signals are 1, water, 2, metal. Now,
lead paint, bad.
Yep.
Plumbing, bad.
Plumbing, not so bad. It depends.
A little bad.
Plumbing will cause other problems.
Yeah.
But the main thing that blocks it really is meshes of metal. And also, old buildings tend to have a lot of steel-reinforced whatnots inside of them, which will block signals even more.
If your windows have chicken wire, you're not going to get your wireless to your neighbor's house unless you open the window and put the router in the window.
If you want to know why, Google for the words Faraday cage.
Yep, and if you don't know how to spell Faraday, Google will tell you.
Now, basically, the advice there is that the older your house is, or the older your apartment is, the more likely your walls are to block your signal. 2, you want to put the wireless access point, with the little rabbit ears or whatever, in a somewhat central location.
The farther away you are from that, the less likely your wireless will be to work.
3,
so if you want to do it, if you want to be in your bedroom with your laptop in your living room, put the wireless between the bedroom and the living room somewhere.
3, secure your wireless access point. There will be instructions in your router. There are also instructions online. If you don't know what I'm talking about, in the very least, Google for WEP, W-E-P, learn how to turn it on and turn it on.
In fact, use WPA instead of WEP wherever possible. Unless you have a Nintendo DS, then use WEP, because Nintendo DS doesn't support WPA.
Yeah, but at least use WEP because that works fairly well. It'll keep most
There's a million
people
ways
out.
to break it, but random idiots won't be able to break it.
Yes, and you're much more worried about random idiots than you are about hackers because a hacker will get in anyway.
Yeah, there's not much you can do about the hacker. WPA can stop him from getting in by the wireless way, but there's so many other ways, But
Now, I guess my last bit here, because we have gone on fairly long about this, is that if you're setting up wireless, there are 3 types of wireless networking that exist now that you will run into. There's 802.11a, which is old, it's somewhat obsolete now, it uses a lot of power, and it's generally only used for point-to-point links or wireless bridges like I talked about just a little while ago. You probably won't even see that. There's 802.b and 802.g. B is the older one, G is the newer one. G is fully backward compatible with B. B is not always forward compatible with G.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there are access points that will do B, G, or both. When in doubt, get the higher one because a G router will work just fine with your B laptop. But your G laptop will work just fine with your B router. But your B laptop will not work with your G only router. Which usually those things aren't very common anymore.
G only routers don't really exist.
Yeah, I've seen them, but
Yeah. The thing you really have to know is that, B or G will work, but ideally you want a G router and a G computer to get maximum speed.
yes.
If either end is B, it'll work, but it'll be the slower. It'll always default to B, which is slower. G is faster, you want G.
Now, with B and in general, you're going to have at some point when you set this up and you'll follow the instructions, it'll ask you what channel you want to use. I'm not going to explain why, but your options are 1, 6, or 11.
I like 11.
Don't pick anything else. If you're having trouble, find out if any of your neighbors have wireless access points and set it to a different channel.
If your neighbor uses 1 and your other neighbor uses 6, 11 is the way to go.
Yep.
If you have 3 neighbors,
If you really want to know, Google around or ask me, and I'll explain in the forums why you pick 1, 6, or 11.
yeah.
It's kind of complicated.
Don't pick 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10,
You can,
12.
but don't.
Don't pick them. They're bad.
But in general, wireless networking, like wired networking, in this modern day with links to stuff, tends to just work.
Yep. And once you have the wireless part working, your computer will act just like every other computer that's plugged in with a wire, only it's wireless, and you can walk around with it.
Yep. I mean, that should be it for today. This was a very, very brief and cursory overview.
Yep. Oh, there's one last thing to know about wireless. If you have a wireless access point that's G, right, and you have a bunch of friends over, and everyone has a G laptop, but one guy has a B laptop, it'll work, but now everyone is going to be brought down to B. So if you have like 10 friends and one guy has B because he sucks, don't let him on your network because he's going to slow everyone else down.
But basically, if you're interested in all the nitty-gritty, because I actually found it difficult to talk about this without going into insane detail, we're starting up at some point soon our long, ongoing series on how computers work on fundamental, exact details.
We're going to start with the lowest possible level, electricity, and go up to the highest possible level, playing 3D games with surround sound. Holy crap!
Woohoo! And part of that is going to be a very long, tedious section on networking.
Maybe more than one section on networking.
So if you have any very specific questions, you can ask me, but just know that at some point in the future, I'm going to do a fairly detailed show where I won't have to keep stopping myself to think of a simpler way to explain something.
I mean, we'll probably do like a whole episode on email and a whole episode on web and a whole episode on all kinds of stuff.
Yep, RAM, as someone asked about in the forums.
Yep,
and
memory. We'll probably do memory twice because one time we'll talk about memory on the hardware level, and then we'll talk about memory usage when we talk about operating systems.
Yep, if there's one thing you want to take away about memory as a nice little tidbit before we go, one of the things that makes Linux so good compared to Windows is that Linux handles memory really, really well.
Yeah, Linux isn't stupid when it comes to RAM. I mean, Linux will say, he's got this much RAM, and he's got this much swap space. All right. He needs to use this much for all the programs he's running, and it uses the exact amount. Like, it doesn't get out of control, you know?
Windows will just freaking use some of your RAM. It'll leave some to never be used. I've seen systems that act like they have no RAM, but they got, 400 megabytes free.
Yep. And then Linux, if it says you have a bunch of free RAM, we'll say, well, you know what? I can use that free RAM to make the computer faster. Yep. Oh, no, he needs some of the RAM. Well, forget this making the computer faster. We're going to use it. Yep,
stuff like that. So we're going to start doing a very long, awesome series on computers.
And hopefully, when we start doing it, people will send us some feedback, like for each episode, and then in the next part, we can answer the previous part's feedbacks.
Yep, because we're going to try to be really accessible here.
My goal is that my mom should be able to understand how a computer works if she listens to all of it.
And that was Geek Nights with Rim and Scott. Special thanks to DJ Pretzel for our opening theme.
Be sure to visit our website at www.frontrowcrew.com. If you like our podcasts, you'll love our forums. Make sure you visit them. You can send your email feedback to geeknights@gmail.com. And if you want, you can leave us a voicemail at 206-333-1537.
Geek Nights airs every weeknight, Monday through Thursday.
Geek Nights is recorded with absolutely no studio and no audience. But unlike those other talk shows, it's actually recorded at night.